My name is James Robson, and I'm the Victor and William Fung Director of the Harvard Asia Center. I'd like to welcome you to the Asia Center's Research Talk series, which is part of a new series of virtual programming at the Asia Center. The research talks are aimed at showcasing some of the fascinating research that's being done on various facets of Asia by Harvard students, graduate students, faculty, Asia Center affiliates, and other specialists. We very much hope you enjoyed learning from these talks.
Hello, my name is Farhana Rahman. I'm a fellow here at the Harvard University Asia Center, as well as a final year Ph.D. candidate at the University of Cambridge Center for Gender Studies. My research explores how forced migration and the mass exodus of the Rohingya community from Myanmar to Bangladesh has transformed Rohingya gender relations and roles in displacement, specifically how forced migration has affected the gendered subjectivities and lived experiences of Rohingya refugee women. For this research, I conducted 14 months of feminist ethnographic fieldwork at the Rohingya camps in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. My talk today will briefly trace Rohingya women's experiences of violence and forced migration on their everyday lives, and provide a glimpse of the ways in which they navigate new environments, particularly within the refugee camps in Bangladesh. Underlying my research is a feminist methodology that informs the ethics of my fieldwork process, by interrogating the power of knowledge claims through the questions I asked my interlocutors and the various silences and moments that were unspoken. A large portion of the fieldwork consisted of spending time with Rohingya women within their homes, sharing meals and cooking together, and observing and participating in their daily routines and interactions, noting the moments of solitude and the sometimes mundane parts of everyday life. I use subjectivity as used in feminist research through stories as ways to understand lived experiences. Taking from what Marita Eastman writes is useful in providing insights into how forced migrants understand their sense of self and seek to make sense of displacement, reestablish identity in ruptured life courses and communities, or bear witness to violence and repression. In today's talk, I want to reveal some of these narratives by Rohingya women in Bangladesh and the ways in which they negotiate gender and belonging, and the strategies they employ to affirm spaces for themselves within the refugee camp. I'm sure some of you are aware of the situation, but I will begin nonetheless by giving a very brief background of the Rohingya people. As an ethno-religious minority living in Myanmar's Rakhine State, located on the western coastal region of the country, the Rohingya were stripped of their citizenship in Myanmar in 1982 and have lived without legal residency status in the country ever since. A wave of deadly anti-Muslim violence in 2012 in Rakhine State by Burmese Buddhists resulted in increased displacement of the Rohingyas into inhumane settlements and camps. Facing the possibility of violence at the hands of the Myanmar army, many have left their homeland in the hopes of finding safety in neighboring countries. These attacks resulted in prolonged and dangerous rickety boat journeys across the Andaman Sea, primarily to the Southeast Asian nation of Malaysia through Thailand. 3 years ago, on August 2017, an escalation of violence took place in Rakhine State, Myanmar, including rape, gang rape by multiple soldiers, forced public nudity and humiliation, and sex slavery by military captivity directed against the Rohingya. And then, a million desperate journeys began. There was a mass exodus of over 700,000 Rohingyas who left their homes behind, setting off on a dangerous and precarious journey, not knowing exactly where their destination would be, but out of necessity nonetheless, following one another in search of refuge. Many of my interlocutors told me that they walked, ran, swam for days, remained hungry, and carried the weight of their children and other elderly family members, and took with them only some bare necessities and just the clothes on their backs. Ultimately, they would reach the makeshift and overpopulated refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. After perilous journeys by foot and rickety boats for weeks and months at a time, life upon reaching the host community remains dismal for Rohingya women. Changing gender identities as a result of conflict and forced migration for both men and women can often result in gender-based violence. Traditional notions of masculinity and femininity related to appropriate gender roles and relations in certain cultural contexts often transform or shift during times of conflict. and changes in gender power relations within families and couples in some cases result in increased incidences of domestic violence. Some of my interlocutors told me that they continue to endure rape and abuse within their marriages out of fear of being alone with their children with nowhere to go. Despite the gender power relations within the family, there were several instances where men no longer serve as a sole breadwinner. This creates a type of frustration that gets exacerbated because of the gender norms that are embedded strongly in Rohingya culture. Men are expected to be breadwinners and women housekeepers. As family dynamics begin to change, erosion of male power and privilege at the socioeconomic level, such as through loss of economic opportunities, unemployment, and their inability to reconstruct their position within the boundaries of the family, can have consequences resulting in gender-specific violence. There is clearly the continued prevalence of gender-based violence not only during conflict, but also during displacement, flight, and encampment. Not only do the Rohingya refugees bring with them experiences of torture and violence after incidents of mass rape within Myanmar, but also all too frequently the issues are compounded during and after flight. These instances of violence violates their sense of self and renders them particularly vulnerable in situations where the social construction of masculinity and femininity defines gender relations and roles. But despite all of this, Rohingya women are having to assume redefined roles as they struggle to create a space for themselves in their new surroundings. They thus strive to compose a life, to borrow from Mary Catherine Bateson. For many of the women like the ones I met, despite the difficult living conditions in their host community which create particular gendered vulnerabilities, they are able to seek out opportunities for empowerment and develop independence and resilience, such as increased mobility outside the home, and access to various opportunities that they create for themselves. In many cases, they also create kinships and bonds with other women to create a sense of belonging and home in displacement. And I want to focus on one such way they do this, which is through the Talim. Throughout my fieldwork, I found that the Women's Talim, which is a women's only space, is a sanctuary inside Bangladesh's congested refugee camps, where Rohingya women find rare moments of peace and a sense of belonging and hope. The Talim is a gathering where Rohingya women come together and a female teacher reads the Quran, reflects on its meanings, and uses it as a way of healing the trauma that women have experienced. After hours of sermons, listening, and learning, they raise their hands and engage in collective prayer, tears flowing endlessly, using the prayer and supplication to ease their sorrow. For these women, being in the Talim is an important part of the healing process, serving both as a spiritual haven as well as a space providing friendship and memories of home. This temporary space that Rohingya women were able to create provides a momentary microcosm of a home that once was. Although the harrowing experiences of forced migration and displacement can lead to a loss of identity and social belonging for Rohingya women, the Talim creates the spiritual, psychological, and emotional haven that allows for bonds and friendships and feelings of home and belonging to emerge. One of my interlocutors told me that it was not so much only about the physical space of the Talim, but rather it was through the personal dimension which they were able to give meaning to. So by focusing on Rohingya women's subjectivity and the telling of their lived experiences, it helps us to gather complete pictures of the lives of these ordinary individuals living in extraordinary circumstances. The ethnographic vignettes and narratives evidence Rohingya women's tremendous agency in creating and finding spaces of belonging and memories of home, spaces like the Talim. Rohingya women enact their agency through their multiple strategies and negotiations and navigations in their new site of refuge. And indeed, their stories are not of victimization, but of resilience and strength. As one of my interlocutors beautifully expressed towards the end of one of our conversations, I had no will to live, but look at me now. I am surviving. Thank you for listening.